a pause in the case. The Karen Read murder trial takes a one-day break. So tonight, we're getting you up to speed.
That morning, your client said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him.
We take a closer look at just some of the biggest surprises we've seen so far from this high-profile case.
That would put those steps within the house, correct?
It would.
Plus, we're answering your questions. What you want to know about the retrial that's captivating the nation. Canton Confidential, the Karen Read murder trial, starts now.
Jurors in the retrial of Karen Read had the day off, so tonight we want to take a look at where we stand in this trial and how it compares to the first. Good evening, everyone. I'm J.C. Monahan.
And I'm Glenn Jones. Our Melody Mendez has been there at Norfolk Superior Court in Denham every day of the trial so far. So, Mel, what are your observations? What is different this time around?
Well, the biggest difference, I would say, Glenn and JC, so far is the man at the helm for the prosecution, right? Because from Hank Brennan, we're seeing a very different trial only 1 year later.
Special Prosecutor Hank Brennan is taking a different approach to the case. This has changed the strategy and the presentation. The order of witnesses being called to the stand is among the most obvious of those changes. Where previous prosecutor ADA Adam Lally presented the case chronologically, Brennan making his case with the data first, then the people who were there. He's also more animated in his courtroom approach. Here's a bit of opening statements from both attorneys.
The only true and just verdict based on that is that the defendant, Karen Read, is guilty of murder in the second degree.
And you'll hear her words to firefighter Nuttall. She said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him.
Another major difference is the use of video clips, media interviews, showing Karen Read telling her side of the story. In the last trial, the only time the jurors ever heard Karen Read's voice was in panicked dashcam video and angry, worried voicemails. This time around, the jurors are seeing and hearing from her on screen. Brennan playing clips of those interviews in between witnesses.
And you're going to hear from her own lips and many of her statements, her admissions to extraordinary intoxications, her admissions to driving the arrest, her admissions to being angry at dawn that night, and I dare say her admissions that she told.
His mother leans over the kitchen island and says to me, I think he looks like he got hit by a car. Could I have clipped him? Could I have tagged him in the knee and incapacitated him?
Perhaps the most notable difference for anyone who isn't in court this time around, the scene outside the courthouse, or lack thereof.
The doctor was not telling the truth. You learn that was a product.
This was day one of the trial in 2024. People clad in pink were camped out just outside the courthouse walls, watching the trial on their screens in what looked like a tailgate. This is what it looks like now. 1 year later, same case, same place. But now an extended buffer zone around the courthouse has vastly limited the presence of supporters and onlookers.
So speaking of that difference outside court, I was actually talking to an officer out there just yesterday about how quiet it's been. He was there the first time around for the first trial and told me he's actually been very surprised by the difference this time around, guys. Back to you.
Melody, it is round two. So those of us who have been following the case since the start, there have been no big reveals, except for the video. That has made such an impact this time around, something we didn't have the first time.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And it really feels that way, JC, because in the first trial, there were a number of these bombshell moments, if you will, for people watching. Like they did what with the dog, or this person lied about this. But this time around, we know the players, we know the facts, and we know for the most part what to expect. And without that element of surprise, it feels different in and outside court, guys.
Melody Mendez, thank you. We're joined now by defense attorney Morgietta Derissier and retired judge Jack Lew. It's good to have you both here. Melody was telling us about one of the new characters in this saga, which is Hank Brennan. But there's one who is returning from the last trial as well, Judge Beverly Canoni. She is overseeing her courtroom a lot like the first trial. Let's listen.
Incorrect. I told him that she said I hit him.
He wrote in his report, she just read, something to the effect of,
Sustained.
I hope I didn't.
Sustained. I'm not responsible for his report.
No, you're not. But you have read his report.
So again, no comments, Mr. Jackson.
Is this another example of an officer getting a report wrong?
Objection.
Sustained.
Is that report right?
Your Honor. Objection.
Sustained. Move on, Mr. Jackson.
So, Judge Liu, this happens a lot where there is an objection from either side and then the judge makes a ruling. There's not necessarily a specific reason given. So put some context around this for us. Does the judge need a specific reason to rule on an objection? And what's your general sense of her style and substance in the courtroom, Beverly Canoni?
My general sense of Judge Canoni is that she's near perfect. And the ruling on objections, this is not an exposition for the public education, even though it may amount to that in some ways. This is an attempt to give somebody a fair trial, the defendant, and to also give the prosecutor a fair trial. So as long as her evidentiary rulings are correct, it doesn't matter. We even have seen in this case, some of the lawyers in the first trial were over-trying the case, constantly going to sidebar. She is perfectly entitled, and I'd even go so far as to recommend just ruling on those objections and cut down on those sidebar conferences.
You know, it's a reminder this is not Law and Order. You know how you get every little thing sort of spelled out for you as you go along. From your perspective as a lawyer, Morgietta, how do you think Canoni is handling the courtroom?
I agree with Jack Liu, Justice Jack Liu over here. The attorneys and the judge knows what the objections are, right? And she is responding to them accordingly. If for some reason her ruling was wrong, they would have a right to appeal if it came down to that. But there is no need to go into the lengthy detail as to what each objection is because the case is already long enough as it is. So if there really is an issue that could be addressed before the trial starts, usually the attorneys and the judge have a conference if there really is a major issue that there was an objection not properly addressed. And so I think the ruling is going the right way.
But it's not a legal class, is the point.
No,
We're not going to get that fed to us.
Let's drill down on one of Judge Canoni's major rulings just to get a feel for how you guys thought it shook out. Let's take a listen to her decision on whether to allow the defense to call the accident reconstruction experts from ARCA.
I understand there have been repeated violations of the reciprocal discovery orders and my orders, repeated and deliberate. However, a defendant's right to a fair trial is paramount to everything. That's where we stand, and I expect counsel to comply with all rulings and rules of the court and all rules of professional conduct, and no more nonsense. Let's just try this case.
So, Jack, Judge Canoni articulated very clearly why she was ruling the way she did. So let's just put that to the side for a moment. She was also clearly exasperated and cited repeated reciprocal violations. Didn't she also have the opportunity to sanction these attorneys for the actions they took, even though she's going to allow the accident reconstructionists to testify?
She handled it perfectly. She really, as a practical matter, in this homicide case, cannot hurt the defendant's right to a fair trial as to the ARCA experts. And on this issue, she's 100% right. These lawyers are wonderful. I have the greatest respect for them, but they've been a little teeny bit childish, and she's right about that. I'll spare you the details, but she's right.
Oh, I like this direct comment.
Don't spare us the details.
Well, you heard most recently, that, for a long time we heard this drumbeat, we can't have the report in time. We can't have the report in time. That didn't make sense to me, but I'm not all-knowing. But then the expert comes into court and says, Judge, if you really need it, we'll get it to you in time. And that was the truth from the very beginning. So they should have just said, they're wonderful lawyers. I admire you all. But they should have just said to the expert, you got to have this report really fast and reject the experts saying they can't do it fast enough. You have to be firm with them.
Oh, come on. We had homework assignments and deadlines in school. We can do it in court, too.
Absolutely.
And you weren't being paid $600 an hour or whatever it is. I don't know what they're paid. I don't know what they're paid.
We have been receiving a lot of questions, especially actually about Judge Canoni. Here's one from our viewers. She says, if the judge is in some way connected to the Alberts, that is where the home, we're talking 34 Fairview Way, Brian Albert, or anyone connected to the O'Keefe family, wouldn't she have to recuse herself? Judge Canoni actually answered this question herself in court. Take a listen.
I reject the notion that untrue and unsubstantiated rumors spread on the internet can force a judge to recuse herself from a case.
Judge Lou, you ever been asked to recuse yourself?
I have, and I have recused myself.
Really?
And she's absolutely, if you're asking me, she's absolutely right again. The basis for recusal in this case is it's utter nonsense. There are some tiny, tiny, tiny connections, but they mean nothing. This is the craziness coming off of the internet and the people who call them journalists, click feed driven, small-time influencers on the internet are attacking the judge and saying crazy things. I even once recused myself in a case in which Mr. Brennan was the defense lawyer. Ooh.
And I think she used like very specific language. If you listen to her response, it's unsubstantiated. So where is the credibility in having her recuse herself other than the clickbait people out there who are trying to just make a name for themselves?
Trial watchers know about evidence collected during a federal investigation on the handling of John O'Keefe's death. But in court, the agency or agencies involved cannot be named, and the jurors presumably have no idea what they're talking about. Take a look at how this was handled in court.
You were contacted by another law enforcement agency that was not Massachusetts State Police and not Canton Police Department at one point in April of 2023. Do you remember that?
Yes.
I want to talk for a second about that series of interview, or that interview. You were contacted at your residence by these members of this law enforcement agency, correct?
Yes.
So, Morgietta, did you expect this kind of vagueness around the federal investigation, especially now that it's over and we're into this second trial?
I didn't expect the vagueness. I thought they were just going to go right into it. That was the whole point of getting all these experts and having these voir dires. Because remember, the voir dire, they got a lot of that information out. And Judge Cannon actually said, you can use this information in the trial. And then they didn't use it. So it was a little unclear. You had all the good juice and didn't bring it out. And maybe it'll come out, but I felt like that was too vague for that scenario.
All right, two very experienced judge, lawyer. Any surprises so far in this case for you?
Well, I've been surprised that Mr. Brennan has made, in short, they have made tremendous use of the dry run of trial number one. And Mr. Brennan is ready to put on a show based on his study of trial number one. That's my ESP of what's going on in his head. And we're in for an interesting ride.
Morgietta, for you, the big surprise?
Big surprise, which should be no surprise, is the testimony from Jen McCabe. And the reason why it's surprising to me is because Hank Brennan made us focus on the evidence and the details and the facts and the math. And 1231-38 is ingrained into our brains at this point. But Jen McCabe's testimony literally is obliterating that theory. And so it's really becoming surprising how they either have not curtailed it or how they're going to put all this together, because that time is stuck in our head. And so the prosecution really is going to need to do a good job of cleaning that up after her testimony.
Judge Lou, we need you back, so please come back again. More
anytime.
Don't go anywhere. We still need you around for just a little while longer.
Still to come, courtroom insider Sue O'Connell will join us. She's been seeing the trial unfold up close, maybe even a bit too close. But she's telling us about the environment inside a very cramped courtroom.
Don't miss any of the Karen Reed murder trial. Get the full recap of what happened in court, expert analysis, and what we could see next. This is coverage you won't see anywhere else. Canton Confidential, weeknights at 7 on NBC 10 Boston.
Hear, hear, hear. All persons have any business before the Honorable Beverly, Canon, Justice of the Norfolk Superior Court, and before the County of Norfolk. Draw near, give your attendance, and you shall be heard. God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. This court is now open. You may be seated.
That's what court attendees hear every morning at trial. Eyes around the Commonwealth and indeed around the world are tuned in. But there's also far more people than normal inside a very crowded courtroom. Whenever we go inside the courtroom, we go to our courtroom insider, Sue O'Connell. Sue, you've been in there for a trial and a bit now. Mm-hmm. You've also been posting on X. Give us an idea of what it's like in there from sort of a physical space point of view. On TV, it looks like a crowded Green Line car.
Did your parents ever put you in the trunk of a car to sneak into a drive-in? That's what it's like. And for Jen McCabe's testimony, there were actually visitors who came to watch in, as well as the people who were supposed to be there. So there were some retired lawyers who came in, and they were able to walk in and around. There was some guests who were seated behind me who were there as guests of the court.
How many people are we talking about?
About 60.
Oh, my goodness.
At my count. So it's really, really crowded. And on top of that, the chairs that the lawyers are sitting in, as they should be, are really big. So when someone has to get from the side of the table where the jury is to go through there to get up to the sidebar, they're tripping and they're falling over each other. I mean, it is really very claustrophobic and it's tight. And of course, we can't open the windows too often because of the sirens, because it's the busiest street in America. And if we have the AC on, then we can't hear the witnesses and the jurors can't hear the witnesses. So we are forever going back and forth between this really crowded, stuffy room where people are falling over each other, opening and closing windows, and turning the AC on.
That explains the fan.
It's an old state. It's an old courthouse. We all love the fan. Don't change that. But give us briefly the history of why we're in this small courtroom. We have larger ones here in Massachusetts.
Right, about steps away. On that floor, we have a large courtroom, but at the last trial, Attorney Alan Jackson looked and saw for the first time, you've been hearing cases in there for over 100 years, that 4 of the jury seats in that courtroom cannot see the witness's face. And he said this violates Karen's right to a free trial. Judge Cannon said, we're not even going to discuss it. We'll just move into the other room. I've made a prediction that you're never going to hear a defense trial in that room that's going to have a full jury ever again, because it will be dismissed on appeal.
Absolutely. So, Morgiana, when you're in a courtroom that isn't suited for the situation, does it actually change the way you might try the case?
You definitely have to prepare differently, right? Because, again, when you're in front of the jury, perception literally is everything. So you want to come off polished. You want to know, like, you know the courtroom. You're pointing to exhibits. You're pulling exhibits out. You're talking to witnesses. So honestly, I have gone to courtrooms a day before or a week before my trial, just so I know what the courtroom looks like, so I know where to stand, where to walk, how straight am I standing. It all really does matter.
Okay. The good news is everyone is tripping. Well, all of them are.
Let's show you a little bit about what this is, because we're talking about when they get up for sidebars, which has been happening a lot. Take a look.
All right, could I see counsel at sidebar for just a minute, please? Let me just sidebar.
Judge, Your Honor, may we approach, please? May we approach, Your Honor?
Okay.
Okay, you didn't see it, you heard it. May we approach? Sidebar, please. Sidebar. So when everyone gets up, Sue, to your point, they're trying to, it's like, excuse me, pardon me, excuse me, can we get there? Morgiana, it makes kind of a scene when they go to sidebar. And now this time, Karen Read is joining her lawyers. What is the impact, if any, on a jury to see the defendant get up and down, up and down?
It shows she's invested, right? You want this defendant to be a part of the case just as much as the prosecution is saying that she's not, right? Because everyone's looking at her, the world is looking at her, and it shows that she's not going to just sit down and let them say anything about her. It is very rare that defendants do go up with their attorneys to sidebar. I've only ever had it happen once, but I think it's refreshing to show that she is actively participating in her own defense, which you don't really see a lot of times.
Which, by the way, I don't get credit for asking that question. That question came from Susan in Braintree. So thank you for asking it, so we could find out, because we don't know what kind of impact that could have.
Yeah, and I think the jurors are going to appreciate that. She's not just sitting there and letting her attorneys talk amongst themselves. She is actively participating in the case. I think sometimes she talks about researching in the case as well, and she said that she's on top of it. She comments after court. I think all of that really does matter to the jury, to be honest.
All right, let's look ahead to tomorrow. Jennifer McCabe will be back on the stand for a third day. She's, of course, one of the people inside 34 Fairview Road on the night all of this had happened, and the first to testify in the retrial. So, Sue, do you have a hunch on where we may go after Jennifer McCabe finishes cross and probably is redirect examination from Hank Brennan?
So Hank Brennan told us he's going to use data to tell the story. So the way that he set up Jen McCabe was he had Celebrite, he had Whiffen testify first to give us a context to understand what Alan Jackson was going to ask Jen McCabe. So I think we may hear it from the dog expert next, and then we will hear from someone who will testify about Chloe. But I think what we're going to see, whether or not it's a dog expert or not, we're going to hear a scientist or an expert who has data or evidence that is scientifically based, and then a person, and I don't mean that expert witnesses are people, but a real person who was either in the building or in the house or was at a scene in some way, so that the jury has some basis of understanding of science, so that when Alan Jackson or Yannetti or Alessi get up there to attack the witness's credibility or story, the jury they're already going to have some scientific evidence to underpin that.
Morgietta? Last word?
I agree. I think that the timeline is a little bit more refreshing. It's a little bit more clear, which could be a blessing or a curse, right? Because if you have the expert come on and then the witness say something different, like we're doing in the Jen McCabe situation, it could hurt the case. But so far, so good.
Sue, Morgietta, as always, thank you so much. And thank you to all of you again for joining us. If you have any questions about this case, keep sending them our way. The email is on your screen, canton.confidential@nbcuni.com. We'll answer as many questions as we can.
And remember to join us every weeknight at 7. We'll have a full recap of the latest developments from court as well as legal analysis. Plus, episodes will stream on Peacock. You're watching Canton Confidential, the Karen Reed murder trial.